Deleted session, July 18, 1977. Now, good evening. Probabilities are not pulled in by mere whim, but through desire and intent. Rupert's body is undergoing profound beneficial alterations, for his desire and intent seemingly have changed overnight. Relatively speaking, words, symbols, signs, anything that can be used by a personality often become a new focus through which probabilities are altered. These are not so much bridge beliefs as bridge intents. Rupert's intent to be responsive is being used in that fashion, and the word with its meanings brings about a juggling or change about of other important intents, which then change alliances. The word combines all of his goals, physical and creative, into one clear focus in which there is no ambiguity. In a way, then, the word, with its intent and meaning, has tremendous power to which the body is responding. Responsive, that word does not imply retreat. It also implies the ability to respond, the energy to act. The joints have all begun to move better. In some cases now this means, relatively speaking, slight enough motion, but highly important. The circulatory system, again, is activated. This is noticeable particularly in the feet. And all of the ligaments are beginning to release. This is an overall activation because of the overall intent, and therefore more in balance than the beginning of improvements in the past. The body instantly responds to a new image by activating its entire mechanism. Rupert does not yet know what his response to the word will be, whether he wants, for example, television shows and so forth, or not, but he is now determined to respond, to be responsive, and not to simply retreat. He has been searching for a key of that nature, something about which he could rally his forces. The moment came insignificantly enough, as Friday evening passed with your company on the porch. Give us a moment. It was because I knew this that I was relatively severe in our last session, wanting to make sure that both of you made the best use of that important advantage. The session is extremely valuable, so on your list, write. Do not think in terms of absolutes. As far as Rupert's condition has been concerned, you both have habitually thought so in terms of black and white that you audit a narrow, limited area in which improvements might begin, but could only go so far. Suggestions such as I have given you are meaningless if any improvement is faced by an attitude that says, such a minute improvement is meaningless, or this has happened before and gone nowhere. And so I wanted those attitudes completely rooted out. I also would greatly like the two of you to remember your own considerable natural creativity, innovative ideas, and the usual independence of thought. Ralph noted, all amused. They said those are your assets. They should be applied with the idea of helping Rupert to improve. Again, his condition does represent the one area where both of you have felt cowed, often helpless, and as if your abilities worked in all directions, but that one. The important point is that that area was the one area in which you did not use those abilities. Nor should either of you spend time bemoaning what has happened, or dwelling upon what people can do to themselves. This is not only waste of time, but it adversely affects your creativity, and that frame of mind will never generate solutions, but only further difficulties in any area. As he is using it, the word responsive will give him freedom to respond as he wishes to the world in general, so that the two of you can make decisions. There is an overall picture you cannot see, in which you form your lives together, so that at one time you act, for example, as a unit, and on other occasions or times, one acts out certain of your joint beliefs, while the other acts out another one. This happens in any relationship. You have said, I believe, something to the effect that the house or the money means little in the light of Rupert's condition, meaningless charter in a way, since if you did not have the money or the house, that would not mean that Rupert was necessarily in excellent physical condition. The freedom that the house and the money represent is extremely important to both of you. Rupert did not put himself in poor physical condition to get those things. His physical symptoms were the result of methods or habits of dealing with himself and the world, and of attitudes that both of you shared for the greater part of your lives. He applied those methods of his own, but they differed from yours only in degree. You would not go so far. To a large extent, however, you agreed on retreat rather than response. To some extent now, you applied discipline in your work and life to protect yourself against response to a world that you felt was insane, in direct conflict with artistic pursuits, and in which you felt quite alien, both of you, that is, as a unit. Since you both held those attitudes and saw those beliefs everywhere reinforced, naturally enough in your experience, then in the old it would be most miraculously unusual if one of you did not physically retreat. Your nature allowed you to try. You found it intolerant and recovered. Because of Rupert's other characteristics personally, he tried it on 4 sides, and found it fit with considerable shelving. But overall that way of life, to some extent, has suited you both. You wondered in the secret depths of your mind how well suited Rupert was for the solitude you believed necessary to produce good work. You intend, both of you, having the cat fixed, so he will not be frustrated inside. Rupert fixed himself, and fixed it so he could not go outside, because according to your joint overall attitudes, you believed you must isolate yourselves against the world. Rupert felt it would be more difficult for him, so he applied the additional discipline. Only lately have you really made an effort to examine those habits. They have been deeply ingrained. Whenever you applied yourself in such ways, you collect data that seems to support your ideas, so that unless efforts are made to change, the picture becomes grossly exaggerated, and to that extent unrealistic. Some men are fools. Some men are murderers. Some people do not give a whit for your privacy or your work. Some people do not understand artistics or any creative endeavor. None of these remarks apply to all people, however, or even to a majority of people. You can, however, collect information and statistics applying to any one group, and keep collecting it until you find that you do live in a reality in which all men certainly seem to be fools, or murderers, or hostile to creative people. Then you must fight or retreat. Rupert retreated, but the situation was always in basic terms, artificially formed by your joint beliefs. The body can find no firm stance in such a situation, for the artificial conditions blot out the natural realities of any given day. It is the duty and challenge of the conscious mind to ascertain cultural reality, but cultural reality cannot supersede natural reality, or you run into difficulty. Constantly applied tension leads to any and all physical problems. In the face of the circumstances, you do well, avoiding drugs, for example. In many cases, when people make the necessary decisions that would otherwise restore their bodies. Medical drugs have so muddied body orientation that the affair is further complicated. If you continue as you are going, the overall body responsiveness will certainly continue. But do remember what I have said about applying our individual and joint feeling of creativity and inventiveness in those directions. You can be quite happily surprised, not only by your changes of attitude, but by the quickness with which such suggestions are used and utilized. I will shortly begin to divide our sessions between personal material and other kinds. I want to commend you both, however, for utilizing the material in these later sessions, and I remind you to follow your own list in the sessions. I have nothing more to say for the evening, unless you have questions. I will add for Ruber. As I said, the eyes will continue to improve. Copy for an hour for now. The eyes are still changing, as the ligaments in the neck do. But the muscles in and around the eyes are acclimating well. End of session, unless you have questions. Ralph said we'll take a break and see. Seth said, now let me clarify your positions for you. In the past, in your moments of expansiveness, you did two things. You tried to give expression to a natural desire to meet other people who were seriously involved with matters that concern the soul, the body, and the political and cultural life of man. For those are your concerns also. You hope to cast understanding upon man's soul, his body, and alter his concepts of his cultural reality. At the same time, you both made sure that you reinforced your own beliefs, so that the people who can did not altogether click with you. You could say, well, that is that. We made an attempt, and drop the entire issue. As Ruber's body becomes more responsive, it means also that he is becoming more responsive, not just physically, but in all areas. He thinks he feels uncomfortable with other people on such occasions, because he is physically uncomfortable sitting for long periods, or because he feels in an inferior physical condition. Instead, of course, he felt in such a position before the symptoms showed, as each of you felt, and were convinced in black and white fashion, that creative people were misunderstood, held in inferior position in the world, and were generally considered oddballs. Ruber's own abilities, he considered, represented even the furthest reaches of the creative realm. Therefore, putting him in twice as inferior a position, in the light of your beliefs, the better you considered your own works, the worse your position in society, and your opinion of your fellow men, the better the creator, the worse his social position, the greater the ridicule. The shoddy, superficial, popular novelist is acclaimed. The original creator is scoffed at. Ruber could not stand ridicule, and so took a proud retreat. He now understands that retreat denies the responsiveness natural to the body, mind, and spirit. It is dangerous to use generalities. You are not popular novelists. Popular novelists are also individuals with a certain amount of creative talent. Many of them feel almost the prisoner of abilities that will only extend so far and no further. The mass attention and the money that at times you either envied them or scorned them for is often a badge to them of their own inadequacies, a compensation that is held a curse. So do not deal in generalities of that kind. You put yourselves in the position where if you valued your own work, you expect to receive no recognition, and the greater the work, the less recognition. I suggest that you do the exercise you mentioned, dealing, however, with an excellent increase in sales of the books, for this will help many other people, and you also. Rupert's responsiveness will show physically. When he feels he can physically handle guests with some finesse, if not with perfectly normal behavior, you will know that his mental and emotional patterns have changed. You will also know that your emotional and mental attitudes in that regard have changed. Ralph said, well, sending out suggestions about selling books implies a change of attitude to some extent. They said it does indeed. Ralph said, so I am wondering if our doing this will collide with what we are trying to do about the symptoms. The suggestions about sales won't increase his feelings of vulnerability, will they? Just when we are trying to build up confidence and so forth. They said, the increased sales do not necessarily involve you with guests of the stature you are speaking of, or with definite appointments made, in which there is direct personal contact. I am not saying that you should refuse guests. When Rupert is ready, and when you are ready to begin to embark upon relationships with others of any importance, his condition will show it. We are not speaking simply of guests, but of a willingness on your part to begin relationships in line with your work and of direct contact, planned in advance of personal contact. Unexpected visitors are something different entirely, for they require no conscious decisions on your part ahead of time. I am not saying that you should wait at all until Rupert worked perfectly normally. The situation of attracting the people that you want will come quite naturally as Rupert feels more and more competent. I also want to give you time jointly to explore how deeply you want such contacts, if you want them at all. Much of this, however, and further understanding will follow quite naturally. In the past, you gave yourselves no leeway. Give us a moment. Raise your hand. You have made no attempt to form bridges out to others. You did not believe it worthwhile. To the contrary, you stressed your differences always. Again, the return to the natural world reinforces feelings of creature brotherhood and serves to connect you with your kind, even while you admit the vast differences in beliefs, customs, religions, and so forth. Your black and white beliefs have often led you both to either expect scorn, misunderstanding, or, on the other hand, to expect too much of others who come here. It is good, however, to suggest that your definition of important people, read the books, to suggest that the books fall into the proper hands in those terms. If you continue to understand your own attitudes, the entire problem of who to see or not to see will be taken care of easily and naturally. Then underline 3 times. You will find it easy also, amazingly easy, to find some format for seeing others. I imagine small groups, sometimes of professionals, at comfortable periods of time throughout a year, that will also follow naturally. I am more concerned that the ideas of responsiveness be followed now, and that you apply your feelings of creativity to the situation. When Robert does not feel ashamed to meet guests, it will seem to him that this is because he is so physically improved. Actually, the improvements follow and are the physical materialization of his responsiveness to himself and to the natural world. Do not be so concerned, either, about so-called important people. Many of the unimportant youngsters who write you will be important people in the future, when you change your beliefs and attitudes so that you no longer expect so-called important people to ignore you. They will not. I do not share your concern about important people to begin with. Do you have other questions? Ralph said, I would like to go into the probability dreams, as I call them, concerning myself and my parents, but we can discuss those later. Seth said, we will then go into that with other material at our next session. Robert's interpretation of last night's dream was correct, and his dream experience will show greater depth and variety now that he has stated his intent by beginning his noted dream. Seth said, notebook. End of session and a fond good evening. Ralph said, thank you very much. Says good night.